Yani ukitega, kama ndoano ukitega, samaki ya kule, ndio unasika tu hii nini, plastic.
Imagine living in a country where plastics are everywhere, a country where politicians who are decision makers are motivated by greed rather than the needs of their people.
Politicians see today, they don't see tomorrow, while science sees next year or 10 years from now.
You know, we have single-use plastics. We have interesting things, bottles, milk bags, sandals, shoes, name it, like you can see them all over. This finally ends up in the lake, and the water, Kisumu water intake is only 300 meters from here. It's really, really terrible at this point. These people don't have any information about what plastics can do to the lake and to their life. Out of sight, out of mind.
Shughuli za kiuchumi ambazo wafanyabiashara wanafanya ndio wazalishaji wakubwa wa taka. Kwa hiyo kwa mujibu wa sheria inawahitaji wao kuhifadhi taka kwenye maeneo ambayo yametengwa na maeneo rasmi.
My name is Said Sindo. I am an environmental journalist trying to investigate the direct impact of plastics to human body. For the last 9 months, I headed a team of environmental journalists from East Africa that were from Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania, where we sat in Kampala for just a week to investigate the direct impact of microplastics to human body.
Lake Victoria is one of the major resources which is very important to the community of Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. And when the lake is getting polluted or when the environmental changes are taking place in the lake, we lose the vital resource, which is fish. When we lose fish, we are having stress in human because it is through that fish that we get capital for all other activities that we can do.
The Lake Victoria is not just a source of water for communities depending on it. It is just the source of heritage, culture, identity, and much more.
I've only been here for like 10 days and I've walked past and seen streams that are going directly into the lake that are full of plastic. And after having a conversation today, we realized that a lot of the plastic is sinking down, so we don't see it. And that is sort of like us blinding ourselves from the problem because we don't see the plastic that we're using, but it's all really now in the fish that we're eating. So we really won't see it until it's in our bodies.
Kwa sababu ni mchakato ambao unahitaji wazalishaji wenyewe kufahamu kwamba wanaweka mfumo gani. Yani kwa mfano pangekuwa na mfumo na wao chupa hizi ambazo wanazalisha wanaweza wakawa wanazirejesha badala ya kuwa kinaenda kutupwa kirudi kitumike.
Without that, we are really killing our people.
Microplastics contamination in the Great Lakes is currently unreported and compared to other regions of the world. Retro is known about the occurrence of microplastics in African waters and their fauna. The present study was conducted in the Mwanza region of Tanzania, located on the southern shores of Lake Victoria. Plastics were confirmed in 20% of fish from each species.
There are several issues why microplastic Lake Victoria in African freshwater haven't been studied. The first is expertise. We have been lacking expertise in that area. Remember, microplastic just came recently. It's an emerging area of study, and many prominent people in research have already specified the area of concentration.
This research visited the shores of Lake Victoria in Nyamagana district, Mwanza region, where plastics are rampant. Fishermen blames on poor management of trash.
At this time, we deal with enforcement rather than management. And when you deal with enforcement, the entire society look at the environment as a property of the government, but not my property. We must bring Lake Victoria into the national table so that in the national policy making body, Lake Victoria is put as one of the resources that needs protection. It is we the people that makes the government to have it as a priority. Government doesn't have to make it a priority, but we the people, we will force the government to make it as a what? A priority.
And to be very honest, these are the great initiatives, but I'm very disillusioned with them. I don't believe in beach cleanups, because if you're having a beach cleanup, but Coca-Cola is still producing like plastic bottles every single day, no matter how many times you clean the beach, the problem is not going to go. So I think now, for me, in 2021, what the plastic revolution means is holding corporations responsible and, you know, completely stopping to produce plastic.
Hizi ni chupa za plastiki ambazo zimekuwa zikitupwa katika mto huu Mirongo na zimekuwa zikisafirishwa moja kwa moja kuelekea ziwa Victoria. Hii ni sampuli ya mkojo ambao umehifadhiwa. Sasa vimekuwa vikihatarisha zaidi usalama wa watumiaji na viumbe hai ambao wamekuwa wakipatikana katika ziwa Victoria.
On 2014, weight ratio was 1/5, and the projection shows that by 2050, oceans and lakes could probably have more plastics than fish by weight.
Katika ekolojia, samaki akishakula hiyo plastics, sasa na sisi binadamu, kwa sababu tunatumia samaki kama kitoweo, inaweza ikawa ina madhara, ingawa ushahidi wa kisayansi bado hujafanyika kuona ni madhara gani, lakini ni kwamba tunachafua ziwa na kusababisha madhara kwa viumbe.
Although Kenya and Tanzania bans on single-use plastic bags have been largely successfully, Uganda ban has failed and other plastics are uncontrolled. Lake Victoria is the source of the Nile River and the second largest freshwater lake in the world. It cuts across 3 countries in East Africa: Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Since 1950s, global plastic production has a scary ranking. Plastic breaks into microplastics, turn pieces of plastics wasted not more than 5 meters away from the shores. There is no much research on microplastics in Lake Victoria, which is surprisingly that is the source of water on one of the biggest river in the world, the Nile River.
Where you see like the lock there, that is the 0 point, that's the mark of 6,400 kilometers. The length of River Nile. Yeah. So you see the post there, you know, because yeah? How deep is this? Lake Victoria is 85 meters deep. 85 meters. And River Nile is 36 meters. 36 meters. Yeah.
Welcome to the source of the Nile.
Oh, so here is the source of the Nile? So because of that.
Bahati Mayoma is the microplastics researcher from Tanzania. He corrected samples on the deepest surface water for microplastics in Lake Victoria.
For the first time now we are going to report data which are collected at a very specific time of the year and covering the 3 countries. So for me this was a very nice achievement that will have even very few variations from other environmental parameters which could have affected the validity of the data if we were to sample from different seasons of the year.
Despite the water bodies being shared by both countries, these countries do not have a universal conservation strategy. In 2013, Kenya and Tanzania authorities signed a memorandum of understanding of a joint cooperation framework to conserve the lake. 7 years later, the joint cooperation framework is yet to be finalized. Environmentalists argue that drays have pushed away donors from financing conservation projects along Lake Victoria.
We have had a problem of having one resource but managed by different tools. Kenya with its own Fisheries Act, Tanzania, Uganda, but we have also had the element of politics. Yeah, during an election year, there is no government which wants to focus on enforcement. They don't do patrol because arresting fishermen is arresting voters. It is the largest tropical freshwater fishery in the world, and we cannot allow it just to go like that.
Due to the complications of doing a research alone, I compared to work with other water journalists around East Africa that we set for a week in Kampala to investigate. We succeeded returning home after just a week. We received an email telling us that we should bear with them because water testing takes some time. So they told us that they will give us the feedback as soon as possible. A month later, one of my fellow journalists emailed me an article showing that one of the scientists has done a research that shows the direct impact of microplastics to human body. A research done by Dr. Swan, who shows how pollution is causing male organ to shrink.
Well, they came to understand it first in animals, because that's the way science works. You know, first you do animal studies and then you try to replicate them in humans, right? I was flying on a plane to Japan to go to a conference. I was with a friend who was a chemist for the Centers for Disease Control. And he said, Shauna, you should study phthalates. And I'm going, why? I'd never heard of them. Why phthalates? And he said, well, we have been measuring them at the CDC, and they're in everybody. They're in pregnant women. And this group of scientists in the National Toxicology Program has shown that they alter the development of the male newborn. And they called that the phthalate syndrome. That's what it's called. That collection of changes that come about after the mother has phthalates is called the phthalate syndrome. So I thought, well, does that happen in humans?
In 2017, Shana Swan and her team of researchers completed a major study. They found that over the previous 4 decades, sperm levels among men in Western countries had reduced by more than 50%. The results sent shockwaves around the globe, but that was just a beginning.
Now there's no question, I don't think anyone questions, that at least this class of chemicals, which we know lower testosterone, alter the development of these boys. If you believe that, then a sensible thing to do was to take a group of adult men who could give you a sperm count and measure their AGD, right? And then you could see whether those with a shorter AGD had a lower sperm count. And then you would have one pretty solid piece of evidence that chemicals in the environment lower sperm count. So I got all these people asking me, what should it be? What's good enough? What's big enough? So I did this translation from the millimeters for you. So here it is. The 2 inches is the median. Men who had less than 2 inches were 7 times more likely to have a sperm count in the subfertile range as men who had an AGD longer than 2 inches. And then another study in California showed that infertile men in an infertility clinic versus men who had born a child had smaller taint length. And so somewhere in there, it started having an effect. But where, we're not sure, but I did look at the decline in sperm count over time, so we could look at that as an indication that this is not the only thing that's affecting sperm count, by the way, these phthalates. But that's one where I feel I can say this with confidence because I measured those babies and I did it, and other people have done it, and so it's I believe it's solid, and that's just one example of the many chemicals that can affect our hormone system.
In the fact that this research have been done, more activating campaigns, events with activities, innovators, schools, children, policymakers and the media in the Lake Shores community needs more activation.
Not everybody can take such a big responsibility of sacrifice to do this study, so that could be one, but we hope that with time and the more we put data out, probably we are going to attract many young scientists.
The first surface deeper water analysis of microplastics in Lake Victoria was conducted.
If we are not aware, Lake Victoria will be dead. The lake is dead when it cannot support the species of life. It cannot support the community around it. It cannot support the community inside it. Then that lake is defined as dead. And if we are not taking pollution seriously, or we are not taking climate change seriously, somehow in the next millennium, Lake Victoria will be dead.
The UK government pledged to take the campaign to COP26, the UN Climate Change Conference to be held later in 2021. Over the thousands of people signed a petition to ban single-use plastics in East Africa community. A draft bill prohibiting single-use plastics will be taken to the East African Legislative Assembly.
I had a meeting once with representatives of METL. And they're buying plastic bottles at 300 shillings, but that's not worth the damage that they're causing. The solution for us is finding ways for plastic or recycling and things like that to make money for people, because I feel like that is the only incentive that will make people, you know, do it so strictly as it needs to be done. I think also the solution starts really now at the younger generations and, you know, teaching them from a very young age of the dangers that they're facing, because it's their future. Corporations are never going to stop because they're making money from it. But if the government comes in and says that either you have to have some sort of corporate social responsibility where you invest this amount into recycling, into community initiatives, into cleanups, because they have already created a mess. And I think a very important step that we need to see either this year or in the coming years is a complete stop to all non-essential single-use plastic.
More than these efforts is needed, especially for younger generation.
There is lack of environmental concern across East Africa, which requires a massive education on environment.
If we make any mistake now, then our children will have no lake.
In order to predict the future, you need to look at the past, look at the present, and then see what happens. In the past, things were okay. People were law-abiding. People were listening. People would be told that do this, and this is a no-go area, and would accept that's just a no-go area. Today, the situation has slightly changed. People are defiant. In everything they try to do, there's defiance. You tell them this is wrong, they say no, that's where they want. So if we continue along such believing in defiance, even in anything, then the future is bleak. I don't want to be a pessimist, I'm a scientist, I am building that on what I'm saying. But if people can learn and adopt, come back to our souls, we do thorough soul searching and understand that this, we are doing it for ourselves, but also doing it for the future generations, then the future is bright.